If people buy the raffle tickets, we will collect them tomorrow morning.
Well, welcome back with your coffee and dessert. We are going to move right along with our program today, and we have the really great honor and pleasure to have Ms. Irina Bokova with us tonight. As you know, she's the director of UNESCO and Director General of UNESCO, thank you. And also, we're very excited because she's a candidate for UN Secretary General in a very interesting new open process of transparency and has been speaking in hearings before all the General Assembly. It's been a very exciting time. And I've had a chance to get to know her a little bit in the last few months, and we've done a video interview with her just a few days ago with John Tumminia sitting back here, John. And so John had put together a wonderful list of questions for her. So I'm going to kind of follow in that vein because we've already rehearsed this. Okay. But first of all, I wanted to remind you that this event is brought about by the Friends of ACUNS. So we're connected with ACUNS, the conference you've been attending. And we have an endowment that we set up several years ago, and we have a board here that manages that endowment. And so your contribution tonight with attending the dinner goes into our endowment. And those funds pay for the book award, which you're going to hear about tomorrow. We give a $1,000 book award every other year for the best book on the UN system. We also enable travel grants for young scholars to be able to come to ACUNS, and we give out the Jean Lyons Award for the best a paper by a graduate student at the conference. And we've also done a great deal of help to the journal over the years, Global Governance. And so, you know, we're here to help, but we need your help to be able to do a better job. So we have brochures on the table if you're interested in giving an additional donation besides your dinner ticket, then we would appreciate that very much. All right, so Irina Bokova is a really fascinating person. And we've been talking about her history growing up in Bulgaria during a very different time and living through that transition. But her work now at UNESCO, it has evolved tremendously. And we've talked about and heard so much about the destruction of cultural heritage sites. And Ms. Bokova has talked about how cultural heritage sites are really a human right. And I'd like for you to explain that a little bit more to the people here sitting here tonight. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, thank you very much, Jean, and thank you for this very kind presentation. As you mentioned, we have engaged these last months, and thank you for inviting me to this evening. I heard about ACUNS. I know some of you, and I know that it's such a wonderful mixture of practitioners. As if UN is here, academia, civil society, we need indeed a lot more thinking around issues like human rights, as Ken mentioned, or humanitarian concerns and protection of civilians, and conflict, intolerance, extremism that is on the rise, unfortunately, terrorism, and it seems that all of this emerging challenges and threats are so much linked. While at the same time we see a world that is full of opportunities. So isn't it a paradox that we see new technologies coming, and a lot of advancement in health, in any of the development issues. And at the same time, we see as if the world is more and more and more fragmented, and everything is falling apart, and we have kind of to bring us back to around certain values and without certain purpose. So I think from that point of view, culture, heritage, identities are coming more and more into the forefront of politics, of international agenda. What used to be just some, I would say, 10 years ago, or a little bit maybe more, just a concern or something that was very much considered to be part of experts, a few people, of lovers of beauty, of heritage, of a history, nowadays becomes part of our lives. And if I go back just a little bit, 43 years ago, we celebrated UNESCO's 70th anniversary last year, which was established in November. It was one of the first specialized agencies established by the United Nations. It was the different way of looking at building peace and development and protecting human rights. It was about cooperation in education, culture, in the sciences, which was an extraordinary idea for a period of devastating, after a devastating world war. This idea emerged in 1942, when there was the first meeting of ministers of education of allied countries in London. And one would have thought that who were these people that came up with this idea during a war, during the Holocaust, during a terrible period of human degradation, I would say, overall. But this idea made through, and UNESCO was established. And then I believe with time some very humane, humanistic, I would say, concept appeared in order to unite humanity and to give a different perspective of the future. And I'm speaking about the heritage, the World Heritage Convention that was adopted in 1972. And the extraordinary idea of this convention, and that is, I'm mentioning because it's very relevant to what is happening nowadays and what these extremists actually are targeting, is the notion that we declare a site, a building, a mosque, a synagogue, a church, a site ancient, that it belongs to all of us, to humanity, based on its outstanding universal value. The notion of universal value for history of a certain community or a people that we all are linked and belong is an extraordinarily powerful idea. And this is where the notion about heritage started to develop, evolved with time, and became the best way, I think, of a dialogue among cultures. Because it is not just a building, it is not just a stone, as we say, bricks and stones. It's about the message. It's about influences of different cultures. It's about diversity. It's about contribution of all different religions, ethnicities, cultures, civilizations that were to what we are nowadays in the 21st century, have the feeling of a common humanity. And this is where I think what happened these last years, decade, I would say, or even just a little bit more, taking wars in former Yugoslavia also, when we have seen the opposite, that because of its importance and because of what this heritage represents, they started to be targeted deliberately to destroy. Just remember the old bridge of Mostar, which was destroyed without any strategic reason. It's an old Ottoman bridge that was just connecting an old town, the two communities, and it was destroyed exactly to target the notion that these two communities can live together. I think this was the symbolic meaning. And then we saw Dubrovnik, that was shelled. It was already a World Heritage Site. And it was the first case where, for this, the International Tribunal for former Yugoslavia indicted people for destroying and shelling Dubrovnik. It was the beginning, I would say, of this evolving idea that targeting heritage, it was even before the ICC came into existence, that based on the 1944 convention, one of the Hague Conventions on protection of culture or heritage in times of conflict, of course, a different conflict was had in mind, the state conflict, not intrastate conflict. And this is where the difficulty sometimes lays in. But then we saw the Bamiyan Buddhas that were destroyed, and we were so shocked that we thought that this will never happen anymore, that humanity matured, and we all will never let this happen. And now we have seen what Daesh has done in Iraq, starting with the destruction of Mosul, of Nimrud, and then in Syria, of course. And the big question, of course, for all of us is, why these extremists do this? Is it, definitely it's not a collateral damage. It's not the collateral damage of a conflict. And it is a very deliberate. Now, some say it is just to shock us. Maybe this is also the case, although we know that many of the destruction, and because we monitor this situation, there is much more destruction that was not shown on the social media. And we know that they do it just because they don't believe in all of us living together. They don't believe that there is this diversity that has to be maintained, that there can be tolerance, that there can be people living together. They want to destroy, to erase history. They persecute minorities. They create this humanitarian disaster in crisis. Something that I know, maybe here lawyers and jurists will say there is no such legal term. I couldn't find another way of describing this as cultural cleansing, because it is combined of destruction of heritage, of persecution of minorities, attacking their identities, physical, also I would say destruction. I'm talking about the Yazidis, to mention one, because I know that Yazidis are very much into the spotlight of politicians and lawyers in order to describe this as a genocide. So when you uproot them, when you destroy their temples, when you enslave their women, you kill men, and you just you want to forget as if they have never existed in humanity. And this is what I think is an extremely dangerous, I wouldn't even call it ideology, but it's a way of thinking, extreme way of thinking, and combined with the terrorist attacks and the rise of extremism of certain, I would say, the foreign fighters. And we saw terrorist attacks in Paris, in Brussels, in Turkey, in Bamako, in Indonesia, and in many places. We unfortunately saw in Rwanda this terrible, I would say, atrocity that was committed just a few days ago. So I think that all this shows, and it was widely ignored, I think the issue of identities, of cultures, of this importance, tolerance, I would say, issue. So that is why I think we have really to work more. This is what, of course, we at UNESCO are doing with all the related aspects, trafficking of antiquities, trafficking of, which is linked very much to trafficking of other illegal activities, and just to educating young people. We have started different programs, looking at hate speech, textbooks, teachers, internet, and youth radicalization. We made 2 years ago an important conference. We are moving this October in Canada. We will have another, possibly with the internet providers, and they have started already some actions into stopping this hate speech and incitement to violence. I think all these are coming to the forefront to us, and we have to deal with this.
And you mentioned that you had been in The Hague recently.
Yes.
And can you explain the new developments in the case before the ICC regarding the destruction of cultural heritage?
Well, I was indeed. I was just a few days ago in The Hague, invited by the Institute of Global Justice, but also by the Europa Nostra, an organization, European, that works in the protection of heritage. So I made these two conferences and speeches in one day, but I used this opportunity also to visit the ICC. They have a new building. They invited me for the opening, and also to meet with the team of the chief prosecutor, Bokova and Suda, who are working particularly on the case of Mali. Because I think this is a very important case. We know that in the Rome Statute, I think Article 8, if I remember correctly, there is a direct provision saying that deliberate destruction of heritage is a war crime. And I think, and we have the same, but without the specific consequences in the 1954 Convention. So once the destruction in Mali, of the mausoleums in Mali was done in 2012, and I went with the French president who invited me to go after extremists were pushed away from Timbuktu, because Timbuktu is very emblematic for us. There are, apart from the, which is on the World Heritage, of course, the mausoleums and the Sufi, very refined, I would say, culture developing there. They have the mausoleums, they have the mosques, and they have 800,000 manuscripts, an extraordinary manuscripts, and they're guardians of the best, I would say, time of the Islamic culture, of astronomy, medicine, philosophy, everything that through, I would say, these manuscripts have been preserved and passed on. When we speak about extremists and their activities, we should not forget that they do not discriminate. They target also some of the Muslim communities. In this particular case, they targeted this legacy of wisdom that is contained, and it was a devastating, I would say, view to see the burnt manuscripts on the ground. I would say fortunately, but even it's difficult to say fortunately, because even if one manuscript is being burned, it's already a huge loss for humanity, and they have burned 4,000 of them. And then they destroyed the 14 mausoleums that dated from the 10th century. And this was the moment when I said we had to rebuild it. So we did, we rebuilt it. And we not only rebuilt it, but I went there for their opening because I thought it's important, and there was such an extraordinary emotion among the local communities. I had the feeling that I'm giving back their identity. It was to such extent that families and communities were into their heritage. It was, they couldn't see the future without what they had for centuries. And immediately after the destruction came, I reached out to Madame Bensouda, to Fatou Bensouda, and since then we have met dozens of times. And I said, can there be a case for the destruction of this? And our two legal teams started working together. And some of our experts already testified, not to the court, because it was just the team. And last September, I remember vividly, on the 25th September, because I was here in New York with the Minister of Culture of Mali during the General Assembly. There were a couple of meetings on heritage and illicit trafficking of art, objects and others, and the news came that they found sufficient evidence to, and they have brought him to The Hague, one suspect. And now when I was talking to the president of the ICC, they already have a date on the 22nd of August. The court proceedings will start. I think it's an extremely important, because if we say it's a war crime, we have to act. And if we say that there should be a justice, and there is a international law on that, we have to act. Because impunity, I think, is the worst thing that can happen. And similarly, we work on Syria and Iraq, although Syria and Iraq have not ratified the ICC, but as long as there are more than 25,000 foreign fighters, Madame Bensouda considers that there might be a case, and they're working very intensively also in this. I think this is a very important message about destruction of heritage, but as I said, not simply the physical destruction, but about what heritage and our common approach humanity means in this world.
And that brings me to another point, and I want to thank Ramesh for yesterday bringing up the fact that the UN, and particularly the UN Secretary General, must provide a moral compass for the people of the world. And I would like for you to maybe respond to that in terms of the next Secretary General, and how important would that be to provide a moral compass for the UN through the office of the Secretary General?
Well, I think we have until midnight, right, to speak about the future Secretary General. I think it's important. You mentioned the process, the new process. It's a very challenging, very unusual process for the UN. Although I can say that when I was twice elected as Director General of UNESCO, and I have twice gone through a similar process. Of course, it's a little bit more structured, it's a little bit more kind of a clear, with deadlines, but as a new kind of a way of working, it has, apart from the fact that it gives the candidates the opportunity to interact with the member states, civil society, expert community, media, I think the good side, the other side, upside of this also is that this raised a bigger interest towards the United Nations. In the civil society, in the media, a lot more now I think is at stake, because all of a sudden people turned around and said, yes, there is the United Nations, and we have to see what is happening there and how we may improve. I think this is very positive.
Yes, yes.
If the process stayed still very closed, I don't think there would have been such a big mobilization. There would have been a big push to open the process, but not that much on the very ideas, not that much on the substance. And I think this is also very, very important, even this talk this evening and many similar occasions. Now, another, I would say, consequence is that stakes are rising every single day. Everybody is looking for the, I don't know how to call it, for a magician to, solve all problems all the time. And particularly, if I may, I know, Jean, because you're a big advocate for this, because they say woman also, expectations are even higher. Always when there is a woman, I remember when I was elected in 2009, everybody was telling me, oh, now you're the first woman, we have high expectations from you. And I said, wait a minute, I'm for gender equality. Treat me like a man. Don't put higher expectations just because I'm a woman. Treat me like a man. I think something similar happens now. It is not that I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that I think it is good. It is a very solid process, not least because I think the Secretary General embodies, apart from Articles 99, 100 and others in the Charter of the United Nations, still, as you say, some moral voice and somebody who should raise consciousness and draw the attention to some very important value system of humanity, I would say, nowadays. It's very complicated sometimes in a world which is torn by conflict, but I think if we have a clear moral value, a moral compass for the world, it can make a difference. I think the UN, it's, as we say, it's the indispensable organization, no doubt about it. But how to make it more visible, how to make it more relevant to what is expecting, because it nowadays has on its plate everything. Climate change, development, human rights, peace. It has always been thought to be this way, but now I think it goes down to a very, very concrete ideas and actions that have to be done. And of course, the United Nations is, at the end of the day, member states. I mean, it's Secretary General. As I said, it's a lot of moral authority, and not only. But making this work together, making this uniting around this moral compass, I think is something very, very important. And building trust in the United Nations, we were speaking about these horrible attacks by peacekeepers and sexual harassment or rape, and which totally counter the very idea about what peacekeepers or United Nations should do. So I think there are important things to be done in order to rebuild the trust in this process, and then to move with the other issues on the agenda.
And we could stay and talk for hours, but we do have to wind up. But I wanted to ask one final question, because I know that you've been thinking about this. And we have so many young people here today, students. Hello, my students. But what would be your vision for bringing the youth into the UN, developing, and there are expectations by young people for the UN to lead the way, and we want to fulfill those. But how can we build trust with our youth and bring them into the system in a way that really helps all of us?
Well, I think there are several ways. First, to be frank, I have never liked the phrase and the idea that youth is the future. I know, I guess for you it's very frustrating also. I think youth is nowadays. It's today, right? If you speak about the future, of course, I mean, they will grow up and they will take from us, and they are not youth anymore. So I think what nowadays youth counts is important, right? I don't know, maybe you like it. I don't like it. I have never liked this. Oh, you are the future. I think youth are the present. And the challenge is how to, and I know, of course, we all have been young, and I have my daughter here. She's still young, right? Over here. But what I think is important is to, and they have always been very sensitive to issues like justice and human rights and development and solidarity, inclusion. I think these are great ideas that youth always have been driving them. And how to make this, I think, influence either decisions of the United Nations or some kind of a more direct involvement is critical nowadays. I mean, we speak in some parts of the world, the young people under the age of 30 or 25 are 60%, some are 70%. So the big challenge is how to make their ideas be integrated and implemented nowadays, on one side. On the other side, I think there should be a closer kind of a connection between universities and students and youth with the very concrete activities and programs. I think one of the most fascinating ideas, apart from what we have at UNESCO, we have youth forum, very big youth forum, online platforms. We always try to involve in different, we had the big youth forum in the climate change in Paris before the climate conference, when we made a conference on education for sustainable development in Japan, in Aichi, Nagoya. 2 years ago we made a youth forum before that to speak about these challenges. We involve them now in our thinking about youth radicalization, because we need to talk to young people about this issue, not just about us. It concerns youth at the end of the day. And one of the probably most interesting and rewarding projects, we have signed agreements with some universities for interns, to send us interns, and with the just one for the University of Pennsylvania, we already have something like 60 students that have gone through
summer they spent a month, 3 months, 6 months, and others in our offices all over the world. So I went to Apia in Samoa for the SIDS conference 2 years ago. I go to the Pacific, our office in the Pacific is in Apia. I go to the office and I see a wonderful young girl. She said, "Oh, I'm from the University of Pennsylvania, I'm from Bolivia, and I'm here for 6 months working in UNESCO office." And she said, "This is the best part of my life, where I get training and understanding what development is." I think we need more of this kind, apart from associations, youth, and others. There are instances where I speak about another project which we are developing 10 countries around the Mediterranean with the support of the European Union, mainly in the Arab countries. We encourage them, we teach them civic engagement so that they establish their own societies, organizations, what it is to participate in local elections, what it is to be represented. So it's very rewarding to have this grow, this I would say seeds of democracy grow among young people. And this is so much in need nowadays, and UN can make a big difference.
And the US can do that, yes. Well, I know that we're running a little bit late, but I want to thank you so much for coming and being with us here and giving everybody a chance to get to know you, really know your passions and what you care about and some of the work that you've been doing. So thank you so much. I don't think you want to leave. I have to leave because I have to go to the front.
So, see you tomorrow then.